In this NUAGE tutorial video, we're going to talk about the concept of stem mixing for film and television post-production. So the concept behind stems is that each category of sound in the production is going to be routed to a subgroup that will contain only those sounds. For example, dialogue. All of the dialogue tracks will be routed to a dialogue stem. It's really just a subgroup. In this case, we're going to use group channels to create the stem tracks. Then all of the Foley tracks, the moves, the feet, anything to do with your hands, that sort of stuff, all of those tracks are going to be routed to a Foley stem. Then you have another stem for sound effects, cars, explosions, guns, that sort of thing. Then you have yet another stem track for the ambience, the background noise of the cafe or the warehouse or the garage. And then finally, there's a stem for the music. And this includes the score and also any environmental music that's in the scene or in the film itself, or even over the end credits, that sort of thing. So anything that has to do with music will be on the music stem. Now, these are just the basic stem tracks that are commonly used. Different productions might require different stems or additional stems to cover different categories of sound. It just depends. But for now, this will help explain the concept behind the stem routing. Okay, to begin with, here I have sort of a mock-up of the 50/50 film in channels. It's not as extensive as the real film itself, but this is just to give you an idea. I have the dialogue tracks here in yellow. Then in blue, I have the Foley tracks here. Then in green, I have the sound effects tracks there. And then in this fuchsia sort of color, I have the ambiences. And then at the end in red, I have the music tracks. So currently right now, you can see in the routing section of the fader unit on the display that everything is routed directly to the 5.1 mix. And while that will work to generate the final mix, we can pan everything and route it to that one mix, it'll work. It eliminates the stem track concept. And again, to sort of explain how this would work, stems are another mix down element that's created during a film mix. And what it's used for is for creating alternate versions. Let's say we want to do a foreign language version. Well, we can simply remove the dialogue stem, leave everything else, the Foley, the ambient, sound effects, and music, and replace that English dialogue stem with, say, a French dialogue stem or Chinese or whatever the foreign language version is. So that makes it easier to do a foreign language version. Rather than remixing the entire movie for the foreign language version, we can just combine the stems and then add the different dialogue stem to create that foreign language version. So that's the concept. To begin with, all I'm going to do is select all of the dialogue tracks, and then I'm going to use the macro to add a group channel to the selected tracks. And in this case, I'm going to make it a 5.1 group, and I'm going to label it with the abbreviation DIA for dialogue. Done. Then I'm going to continue on and do the same for the remaining tracks in the project. Here are the Foley elements. Add group channel selected tracks. It's really pissing me off. A and B for ambience. And then finally, I'm going to add the group channel to the music tracks. And I'm going to use the abbreviation MX. So now we have these 5 stem tracks here. I'm going to turn off all the other tracks just so we can see just the stems. Here they are. Now, if you notice, they're being routed to the 5.1 mix. So any signals that are routed to the dialogue stem will then be routed to the 5.1 mix. So everything's going to work out just the same, except we have these subgroups for all the different stem elements. For example, if I select the dialogue stem and expand it, now I'm going to see all the dialogue tracks, the dialogue stem that they're routed to, and then the 5.1 mix that the dialogue stem is routed to afterwards. The concept is that when you're finished with the film mix, in addition to exporting the 5.1 mix and the stereo mix, you're going to also export each stem track by itself so that you have a mix of the dialogue by itself, a mix of the Foley by itself, the sound effects, ambience, and music all independently. And then those can be combined later to create alternate versions of the film. This concept of the stem tracks, let's say for dialogue here, also extends to their effects returns. Let's say you're going to create an effects channel that has room ambience for dialogue tracks so that you can add some sound of the room to the dialogue itself. That room ambience needs to also be routed to the stem group channel. It can't be routed directly to the 5.1 mix because the resulting problem that you'll have is later on when you go to recreate the mix using the stem tracks, you'll be missing the dialogue ambience. And if the dialogue ambience is routed to some other stem, then you have dialogue sound in a different stem, let's say the sound effects stem. So the concept here with effects channels is that you need to create individual effects channels for each stem, and those effects channels need to be routed to that stem group channel. Otherwise, you have sounds going to different stems, and it can make a mess of things. So, for example, let's create an effects channel that is ambience for the dialogue. In this case, I'm going to just add ambience to these 4 tracks. I'm going to use the reverence impulse modeler in 5.1. Now, if you'll notice here, I have that reverence effects channel coming back into the mixer. But notice it's routed directly to the 5.1 mix. This is what is going to cause a problem. So what I'm going to do now is route that to the dialogue stem here. Now I know that the dialogue and the ambience for the dialogue are all going to be routed to the dialogue stem itself. If I expand that, if we go back to all the channels and I go find the dialogue stem here and expand it, I can see that here are all the dialogue tracks, including the dialogue ambience effects channel, being routed to the dialogue stem and then to the 5.1 mix. That way, none of the dialogue ambience will be routed to any other stem, and everything will be organized the way it should be. So that's how you deal with stem routing in a film mix. That's the concept. We'll be back with more tutorials coming up.